episode 4 of the BRAINIAC podcast. BRAINIAC is a collaboration with the U of T Concussion Legacy Foundation chapter, as well as Concussion Talk. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome back to the BRAINIAC podcast. Today we have Nick Eustace, who is our guest for today. Nick, welcome to the podcast. We're really happy to have you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be on it.
We're happy to have you too. I actually just finished reading the article that you wrote last year for the Concussion Legacy Foundation of Canada. Tell me about that. How did you get that opportunity?
So I've been involved with concussions for a while now, and it dates back to grade, I think, 2014. I was in grade 12, and I had just been forced to retire due to concussions. Retire from hockey due to concussions. And I'd always wanted to, it's something I'm passionate about and something that I want to be involved with and continue to be involved with. And I had reached out to the organization at Western, the Western chapter, a few times when I was younger in my first and second year. But I never followed through with it because I was a little nervous to open up about my story. And then I don't know what clicked, but I just thought it was about time, and I was more mature and ready to talk about how concussions have impacted my life.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm very excited to talk to you today because to the listeners, I don't know Nick personally, we've never met, but I mean, reading your story was incredible. So I'm excited for everyone to hear it now who listens to this podcast. So do you want to maybe just take us from the beginning to talk about yourself a little bit? I know you were very athletic growing up.
Sure. So I grew up like most kids in Canada playing hockey. I started off playing when I was probably 3 or 4, and I continued playing. I had to retire at the age of 16, but I was fortunate enough to play a fairly high level for my age. I played in the GTHL, which I consider one of the best minor hockey leagues in the world. And my team, I played for the Toronto Junior Canadiens and then the Mississauga Rebels. And both teams were a top team in the city. And with the Rebels, we had a lot of success, including a few GTHL championships, OHL Cup championship, and an Ontario Hockey Federation championship. And I thought that I was going to be drafted to the OHL, or that was my goal, was to be drafted to the OHL and pursue some sort of professional hockey career. But unfortunately, my career was cut short due to concussions.
Okay. And we're obviously sorry to hear that. Because, I mean, we all know that athletes love their sport, but if you also have that aspiration to go pro, then obviously that's even more disappointing. Because if I remember correctly from the article, you were in talks with some big U.S. schools, right?
Yeah, it was. It was pretty exciting at that point in your life. You worked pretty hard growing up, and honestly, I was kind of shocked that I was getting interest from schools at that point and very excited. So when I had my first school reach out to me, that was a goal of mine to go play Division I hockey. And I was in touch with schools like Providence, Penn State, and Canisius, just to name a few.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, apparently you were really good then. I don't know much about hockey, but that sounds impressive. And did you have concussions like younger, like growing up as well, or was it just kind of in that like latter part of your career?
No, I've always, unfortunately, I've always dealt with concussion issues. But at the beginning of my career, even towards the end, they weren't taken as seriously as they are now. I remember I was probably 11-ish, around that area, and I split my head open. It wasn't hockey, but I split my head open trying to find something, and I fell and my head went through a hook. And so that was the start of my concussion problems. And from then on, I suffered a few both playing hockey. I played lacrosse as well, and I suffered one in lacrosse, and then I suffered a few off the ice.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
so I've always dealt with concussion issues.
yeah, and then but then it was more those ones kind of in later in high school that really were
Yeah,
debilitating. Is that correct?
yeah. All the other ones were pretty minor, and I mean, I didn't really have symptoms or prolonged symptoms at all. And then the last 2 years of my career was really where things started to go downhill. I suffered one in my draft year, so your sixth grade 10 year of high school. At the beginning of the season, I was hit from behind and my head hit off the glass, and it ended up keeping me out of hockey for probably 6 months. And I was in and out of school for 3 months. Or probably 4 or 5 months actually in total.
So you did take that one pretty seriously then, right? Like you took all that time to recover then?
Yeah, that one I took really seriously. Again, we were more knowledgeable about the consequences of concussions and how to go about treating them. And thankfully, my mom, she was well read up on concussions, and my school in general was ahead of the curve. They had a return to learn program back in 2014. And so
That's crazy. I've like never heard of a like that. Yeah, that sounds amazing that they have, and
yeah,
that's specifically for concussions.
yeah, I was very fortunate. I went to St. Michael's College School, which we had a lot of athletes at our school. And this woman who was in charge of the learning center, her name was Barb Senge. She had put into place the Return to Learn program. So you would take steps. You would go in on half days. If you had a concussion or if you had any symptoms when you were in class, you could leave the class to go to this learning center to either sleep or just try and start feeling better. And I spent a lot of time there. Unfortunately, I had headaches on a daily basis, and things such as just listening to music would trigger symptoms. So,
Wow. But wow, good for her. I feel like they need to bring that to public schools too. That's absolutely incredible.
yeah, it was, again, I was very fortunate. Like, I don't think I would have graduated high school when I did without that program, because they kept me up to date. She would reach out to classmates and get notes for me, and I had exams postponed and I was able to write them later on in the year. And I'm just very fortunate that was the case, because I don't know what would have happened
Yeah,
if I didn't have that program in place.
that's fantastic. But so you were really symptomatic during that time, but then do you feel like you made a full recovery from that concussion? Like were you asymptomatic 6 months or a year later?
Yeah, I was. So it took a while. Like I remember days where I would just go ride the bike while my team was practicing, and I would get dizzy, I'd feel nauseous, I'd get a headache. But all in all, after probably 7 months of rehabbing, I was able to get back on the ice and join my team. And I was symptom free for a while until the following year in September, again, at the beginning of the season, I was hit and I started suffering from symptoms once again.
Okay, and how did that hit happen? Was it kind of similar, like on the ice again during a game?
Yeah, I was on the ice. Actually, I was the one who initiated the contact. I was going in on a forecheck, and I hit the defenseman, and just the way we collided, I don't know what happened, but I think I was more susceptible to concussions at that point. And
of course, yeah.
Right away I knew something was wrong.
Okay, so what were your symptoms right from the onset? Do you recall like how you felt right after the hit?
Yeah, right after the hit, I just remember when I hit him, like when we made contact, I kind of went black, like I saw black for a bit, and I went to the bench, and being a young, immature 16-year-old, I didn't say anything to my coaches, and I continued to play, which was not the smartest idea in the world. But after that, like, I went home, and every day after school, I just remember coming home from school, going straight to my room, turning off the lights, and sleeping, because I had really, really bad headaches. I had pressure at the side of my head, and just light would trigger symptoms. Noise would bother me.
And it sounds awful. And were you like open about this immediately, or was this kind of like the coming home from school, turning off the lights, or was it an attempt to kind of keep it from other people and just kind of fight through it?
Yeah, completely an attempt to keep it from people. I mean, I definitely wasn't smart, but I was smart enough to realize that if I had told my parents that I sustained another concussion, that my hockey career was most likely over. So I was almost in denial, and I was doing anything and everything I could to just try and prolong playing and see. I think I was optimistic that one day I was going to wake up and my symptoms were going to be gone, but that just wasn't the case.
Right. And so what time, just because for myself and other people who don't know as much as they should about hockey, what time in a young hockey player's career are those decisions about scholarships and university liaisons made? Like, would it have been in that year?
Yeah. So actually, the year that I was first concussed was the big year for when OHL teams, which is a feeder league to the NHL, start looking at players to draft, and then universities can get into touch with players about scholarships. And so prior to my concussion in that year, I had played in the beginning of the year tournament and a few showcases, and that's where I was getting exposure to those schools. And then I was concussed, and all those schools were put on hold. And then the next summer, when I was 16, 17, I started playing in more showcases down in the States again, once I was feeling better and again was receiving attention from D1 schools. And so that would have been the prime area for when they offer you scholarships.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine that just like yourself, there are so many young guys and girls too, of course, who are hiding concussions or other injuries just in the hopes of being able to like obtain those opportunities. So it's a lot of pressure to put on just like a 16 or 15-year-old. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was tough too, because I had a lot of teammates and friends of mine who were being drafted not only to the OHL but to the NHL, and committing to top universities in the States such as Notre Dame, Providence, Penn State, Michigan, just to name a few.
Mm-hmm.
So that definitely weighed heavy on me at that time.
And so when did that decision come? When did people find out that you were actually concussed?
So it probably wasn't I probably got concussed in the beginning of September of my grade 11 year. And it probably wasn't halfway through October until my mom confronted me. She had the motherly instinct and came in one day after, or I think it was before a game or after a game. And she confronted me, and I broke down, telling her that I'd been concealing symptoms for a while.
Okay. And so what happened next? Is that when you went and sought medical help, or?
Yeah, that's when I went and saw the doctor that I'd been seeing the year prior to that. His name's Dr. Comper. He worked at the U of T clinic, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I went and saw him, and he told me the obvious, that he recommended it, and which I'm thankful for, that I don't continue to play hockey or any contact sport.
Okay. And so that was basically the last time that you played or got concussed in hockey, right? Like after that, you stopped entirely?
Well, that was the last time I played contact hockey or any kind of competitive hockey. I've played in the past beer leagues or pickup, which is a lot more relaxed, and it's not contact. So I played that the last few years, and
Okay.
I really enjoy being able to do that.
That's awesome that you're still involved in the sport in some way, though.
Yeah.
Because I also I read in your article you said it was so difficult to not be involved in the sport in any way because it'd been such a like integral part of your life for like your entire life, right? So that's
Yeah.
so when did you start getting back into it again?
There was probably a year and a half where I kind of separated myself from it. I mean, I was always interested in it, and I was always interested in how my former teammates and my friends were doing, but uh, I just wanted no part of it. Like, I didn't go to any games. I didn't play any beer like pickup. I probably didn't wear equipment for close to 2 years, maybe like full equipment. And it wasn't until again one summer, my mom's friend, her husband reached out to me. He had read I wrote an article back in grade 12, and he had read my article and wanted to know if I wanted to play pickup with him and his friends. So that was the first time I got back into hockey, which I'm glad I did. I really enjoy being able to go out and play, even if it's just for fun.
For sure. And so after that concussion that unfortunately ended, at least to at a more competitive level, your hockey career. So how did you undertake the recovery at that point? How long did it take? And maybe you can talk us through the symptoms that you were experiencing, and yeah, maybe tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So after the last concussion that ended my career, I went back to this similar rehab that I was doing for the one before, where dark room for 2-3 weeks, no phone. I was going to physiotherapy. I was going to an osteopath. I remember doing what is it, high altitude training, just to do some sort of exercise, and I'm not sure the science behind it, but I just remember doing that quite often. And after a while, I still had symptoms every day for like 5-6 months. And I kind of got pessimistic about the outlook. And honestly, I didn't take it as serious as I should have. And I just, at that point in my life, I thought that these symptoms were just going to be a part of my daily living. So I kind of just went on with my life as if I wasn't treating a concussion, which was not smart at all. And I ended up drinking quite a bit and doing drugs to combat the symptoms, which is a short-term fix, but in the long run, it just prolongs symptoms and is not the best way to deal with things at all.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That yeah, that sounds really emotionally horrible, but also physically, like you say, seems like in the long run will just aggravate your symptoms. And so you were doing doing those things every single day, basically, to mask the symptoms you were experiencing?
For a period of time, it wasn't every single day, but it was quite often, if not every other day or days in a row. And yeah, it just got to the point where every day I'd wake up with a headache, or I'd come back from school with a headache. And the only way to kind of alleviate some pain, both physically and emotionally, was to do something.
And how did you pull yourself out of that? Like, I can imagine once you're in that downward downward spiral. I mean, and again, you, for the first concussion, or that first really serious concussion, you were motivated, I suppose, to get back to hockey. But now that you had given up hockey, I suppose you didn't have like that motivation was gone, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the first time around, I had an end goal, was being back on the ice and trying to hit those goals of playing pro or obtaining a scholarship. And the next year, I was lost. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I wanted to go into, or what I wanted to be.
So where was that turning point that because I know you look at it now in a much more positive way. So how did you make that change?
I just think with maturity, as time went on, I got older and I got more mature and realized this is not it. If I continue going down this path, something bad's going to happen. And I just think having such a quality support system around me really played a big role in that. Like having friends who were good friends and a great family around me really opened my eyes to what I was doing to myself.
That's great. Yeah, I know many people aren't that lucky, especially it seems like the people around you knew a lot about concussions, which is also something that many people don't have. So it's great that you had that support system.
Yeah, I was very fortunate with that. I have really good friends, and my family was incredible throughout that, especially my mom. And at the time I was going to school at Western, which is in London, and my grandparents live in London, and my Nana really played a big role in just brightening my day and making me reevaluate what I was doing.
Yeah, and so you were still very symptomatic in like during your first few years of undergrad then?
Yeah. First year I was still I was still dealing with physical symptoms, but not nearly to the same degree as in the past. It was more just I wasn't quite there mentally and emotionally. And then second year, I actually sustained another concussion, which led me to leaving school. It's actually the way I got it. Looking back on it, I just shake my head. I was coming out of the shower out of our house in second year, and the ceiling was kind of slanted and low, and I raised my head back up and I hit the back of my head off the ceiling. And at the time I didn't think anything of it, and a few days the next day I woke up and I was like, oh God, not this again. And then for probably a month and a half I was just having headaches and all jazz again.
That's horrible. Yeah, I can only imagine someone like you that's had so many concussions. When you hit your head, it's just the most horrible sinking feeling, because you're like, how long are the symptoms gonna last this time?
Yeah, and at that point, I was pretty accustomed to the symptoms, and I was pretty. I felt like I knew. Again, looking back on it, not smart, but I felt like I knew what I needed to do to deal with it. So I told my mom December, and I came home from school to just get out of the university lifestyle and kind of hit the reset button.
Right. And so, but you were still able to go back for the next semester?
No.
Oh.
I went back to visit quite often.
Okay.
But for a few months there, I was just at home working and taking it easy and just
full time off of school then.
Yeah. My whole year got completely wiped out.
Wow. And just because of the shower incident?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. See, that's something that people also don't need to realize, is that household accidents are, you can get concussed literally like anywhere. Like there is no border as to where you can get concussed.
Well, I know the vast majority of TBI or concussions are sustained in like trips and falls, not athletics.
Yeah.
So it can happen anywhere.
Sorry, go ahead.
It can happen anywhere.
For sure. Yeah, that is so true. And so when did you decide to go back to Western?
The following year. So when my grade, I was supposed to be in my third year, but I was restarting my second year.
Okay. And how did you how was it doing the academics? Because a lot of people who are concussed in university, I mean, university like it requires all-nighters, like there's so much
Yeah.
that goes into it. So how was that for you? Did you get any support from the university maybe?
Yeah, I got a bit. I got a lot in second year when the concussion happened. They were very lenient with just wiping out the year. The following year, I not as much. I was able to write exams with accommodations if I wanted to, but I didn't. I wrote in the classroom at the provided time. So I didn't really need that much in that year.
Okay.
But I know there were some accommodations available at the time.
Okay. And so after this point, was it relatively smooth sailing to graduation, or did you experience another concussion?
Yeah, it was, again, relatively smooth sailings up until last year, last December, actually, to be exact. I seem to have bad luck with it, but I sustained another one. Again, just a minor bump to the head, and headaches came on. And for me, one of the things I notice the most of when I have symptoms is just one, the headaches, but pressure in the side of my head is quite evident.
Mm-hmm.
And my mood just changes drastically.
Yeah, and I find that I feel like that's a less talked about symptom. So how does it feel like? Do you feel more irritable or?
Yeah, for when I was in grade 11 and 12, or grade 10 and 11, my symptoms, uh, I was very irritable and very aggressive back then. And I feel like I was a completely different person. Like if you talk to some of my friends about who I was for those 2 years compared to who I am now, it's quite different. And then again, in last year when the symptoms started coming on, uh, I just find that I'm very irritable. Again, I have a shorter temper than I usually do, or just my mood seems to swing. Like there are some days I'll wake up and I'm like, oh God, how am I going to feel both physically and mentally? Like you don't know. It's almost like playing roulette.
And I mean, obviously it must be frustrating when you're feeling like that for your family and your friends, but most of all for you, if you don't even feel like yourself. Like I think for most people that's kind of hard to even identify with, to understand what that feels like. But yeah, I feel like that sounds like in some ways is worse than a physical symptom.
Yeah, that for me was probably the worst part about it. I mean, I deal with physical pain pretty well. I'd say I'd have a pretty high pain tolerance. So that didn't bother me too much. It's just the mental symptoms or the emotional symptoms that really took its toll on me.
Mm-hmm.
Like last year, I just remember out of nowhere just having like a panic attack, and my anxiety was awful, and um, depression wasn't too bad, but it just being super anxious for no reason, no apparent reason.
And so I know that in the past you would use like adverse techniques to work against your symptoms, so like drugs and alcohol. Have you, I mean, I know that you don't do that anymore, so that's awesome, good for you, but what type of things do you substitute that with? Do you have other mechanisms to make yourself feel better when you're having a bad symptom day?
Yeah, it's just simple talking about it. And again, it's easier said than done because I'm guilty of still holding things in and bottling things up. But I'm just much more open about how I feel and much more open about my my emotional well-being. And if things are bothering me, I don't feel like I have to hide them anymore. Yeah. Again, I still need to work on it, but I'm better than what I was. And another outlet for me is working out. Throughout my entire concussion experience, working out was vital. I heard someone refer to it as iron therapy, and I truly believe in that. So if there are some days where I'm not feeling the greatest, I know a workout can do wonders, as well as talking with someone.
Yeah.
I think that combination worked well for me.
That's fantastic. And also, I mean, you were saying that you were in a dark room and everything in high school after each concussion. And that seems like the opposite of like a very motivating environment to be in. And a lot of people still just go and sit in a dark room when they may be better off with a medical professional's advice, obviously being on a treadmill or something, right? Because there's actually research now that shows that can actually help not only your well-being, but also the concussion symptoms.
Yeah, I still don't, I understand it, but at the same time, looking back on it, I think that's a very dangerous combo for someone who's going through a concussion. I think we've all appreciated what social isolation does to your mental well-being in the last year. And even if you're not injured, if you sit in a room by yourself in a dark room for 3 weeks straight, that's going to take its toll on you. And then combine that with just headaches and pressure and already not thinking straight. It's a deadly duo.
Oh, for sure. No, that definitely seems like such a depressing environment to be in and everything. So yeah, I mean, the message that we always have is go seek medical help, because besides, obviously, you do need to reduce light and reduce screen time and everything. There are so many other ways now to recover from a concussion besides sitting in a dark room the whole time. So, and actually, speaking of social isolation, how has the last year been for you? I know a lot of people with concussions, you're having to, first of all, do everything on a computer screen, or most things on a computer screen. Was that a trigger for you at all, being on a screen more often?
Yeah, for sure. Being on a screen in general has given me issues the last few years. So I don't know whether they work or not, but whether it's just a placebo, but I bought a pair of the blue light glasses and to try and help with eye strain, but it doesn't.
But it does. Whether it's placebo or whether it's true, you do feel like it's helping?
At times. I mean, not every time. There's still days when I'm looking at a screen for a while and I'll be triggered. My headaches will come on. But for the most part, I've found that the quarantine has honestly been beneficial for my symptoms. I think a lot of the times things that would bring on headaches, and for me, feeling in a fog is a big symptom still, where I feel cloudy, my eyes feel weird, and I think that was due to being overstimulated. Like if I were to go to a sporting event, like for example, Raptors games, really, by the end of the game, my head just kills, and my eyes hurt, and I feel completely out of it. Mm-hmm. So I feel like limiting that, as well as limiting going out on weekends and living in a university environment, has been super beneficial for how I feel overall.
That's good. I mean, I think that's actually, we had another guest on this podcast, Joseph, who definitely in some ways his story aligns with yours, and he said the same thing, that quarantine was actually like a time of growth for him, and in some ways helped him reduce his like daily symptoms. So That's great. And now that you bring up the social aspects, that was something I wanted to ask you about as well. Like I know Western is like compared to U of T, like where I go, it is a much more social university, I suppose. So, or I mean, if you think about it that way, but I mean, how was that for you? Did you struggle with that at all?
Yeah, again, I was guilty of doing things that I shouldn't have done while I still had symptoms. Um, I'd like to consider myself a social person, and I enjoyed going out, and I still do enjoy going out, but I'm just much more aware of the consequences and what I'm doing to my body. But early on throughout my university experience, like there would be days where I would have massive headaches and I would feel almost pressured, or I would just, again, drink to the point where I didn't have symptoms just to go out. And that's just insane to me looking back on it.
And so what about the next day? I guess if I can only imagine that if you're concussed and you're hungover, that it's like a devilish duo. Like it must be like.
Yeah, it definitely didn't feel good. Definitely didn't feel good.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said about just not only the university environment, you kind of feel peer pressure to a certain extent, but also there tends to be a culture within hockey, lacrosse, football, any of those sports where partying or going out with your team is encouraged. And I think a lot of kids at a younger age get sucked into that and kind of ignore, myself included, you ignore like, hey, you have had a massive headache all day. You probably shouldn't do this. But at that point in my life, I didn't listen to my body and just kind of powered through it until I didn't really feel the headache.
And I know that you said your family and your hockey friends and also people at St. Mike's were really like knowledgeable and supportive about concussions. How was that in university? Did people kind of do you feel like people understood how you were feeling, or was the environment different that way?
Yeah, I think they did understand. I don't think I was vocal of how I was feeling. Again, it wasn't up until recently, like the last few years, where I would actually express how I was truly feeling, both physically and mentally. So if they had known that I was still suffering from symptoms, I think they would have taken me aside and said, hey, this is probably not the smartest thing in the world.
Yeah.
I know I would, and I'd encourage anyone who's in that situation to just, it's not worth it at all.
Yeah, that's I mean that's such a good message. Most people I think who have like a similar story to you, or at least a story that holds the same weight in their life, like they're still dealing with it, says the same thing, that they just did things that were so not worth it. So yeah. I think that drives it home. But so so I understand that when you get hit, or a small hit to the head, like like hitting your head on your car door or something, would start symptoms up for you. But do you still have symptoms anyway? Like on a normal day for you, are you symptomatic every single day, or is it more now on like a weekly, monthly basis?
I'd say it's still on a weekly basis, or again, the last little while, maybe bi-weekly, but I still definitely deal with symptoms, which is annoying. And that's why I preach to younger people, like, hey, take care of yourself. I mean, it's been 8 years almost since I last played hockey competitively, and I'm dealing with the lingering effects.
Yeah. And so yeah, I mean, on that note, what would be your like lasting statement, I guess, for people listening who maybe are dealing with a concussion? If you had to like concisely tell them something, what would you say?
I'd say just be honest with yourself and honest with those around you, and Again, if you have a good support system around you, they'll be supportive of how you're feeling and do what's best for you. But it all starts with you. If you're not honest with yourself and you're in denial about how you're feeling, then I mean, you're not going to help yourself.
Yeah. And I think that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just be honest. If you have headaches, do what you need to do and take care of yourself, because you don't want to be 5 years down the road and still dealing with it.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say. It's so great that people like you are like preaching this to others, because you just are an example, right? I mean, you said that last hockey concussion was like 8 years ago. So that's, I mean, it is like a pretty crazy amount of time to still be dealing with it. But unfortunately, that is the reality for a fair amount of people. And so probably my last question for you, Nick, is besides like helping people in this way, which we appreciate so much, have you thought about, I know a lot of people who have really serious concussion backgrounds like yourself try to, make a career out of it, or like long term they want to be involved with people that have concussions. Is that something that you've considered or that you're doing?
Yeah, so I did strongly consider that. I at one point I wanted to go into I enjoy helping people in general. That brings me a lot of joy. So I wanted to go into psych and maybe become a counselor for more than people with just dealing with concussions, just with mental health in general. I don't think I'll pursue the concussion aspect as a career, but it will definitely be something that I'm always involved with. It's something that I'm passionate about, and something that I think, even if I help out one or two kids, something that'll bring me joy. And so I've been involved with it since 2014, and I plan on continuing to be involved. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I have so much respect for that, and I don't like. I'm sure you have helped more than just one or two people, because I think, I mean, everybody that listens to this, everybody that reads your article online, everybody that talks to you, I mean, concussions are so common. So I'm sure whenever I hear a story like this, I don't forget it. Like, I always think back to that, because it is just so profound to still be dealing with that for so many years later. And I do think that really sticks in people's minds. So I think you're doing a lot of good. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, we're so happy to have you. So thank you again.
Yeah, no problem.
This program is sponsored by HeadCheck Health, who bridges the gap in concussion care through simple, powerful technology. Join organizations like the Canadian Football League, Trek Factory Racing, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, Eastern Washington University, and Volleyball Canada, who rely on HeadCheck to improve communication and optimize care. Visit headcheckhealth.com for more. The music at the beginning of this podcast is by bensound.com.